Hello, see this wall? I am not sure if it is Cyclopean or not. I mean, if it belonged to the Southern European culture that was building polygonal masonry, or if it is a different thing. You might think this question is not important, but then you would be surprised to know that to this day people cannot stop fighting about that issue. Very real and nasty wars too, all extrapolated from this same basic question of the cultural origins of the wall and the peninsula around it. Look, I have no interest in the fighting going on over the past 500 years, present war included. I'm sure the Ottomans had their reasons, for whatever, it's not my call. What we are looking at here are events from much further back, thousands of years. However, where there's fire, there's smoke, and by looking closely at that wall, we cannot shake the feeling that maybe because of all that fighting, that is the fire, the story is tainted with lies or the smoke. This problematic set of walls sits in the ancient city of Panticapaeum, today's Kersh, in the Crimean Peninsula. The site was very abused by time, including a massive reconstruction made on top of it, mostly by the Romans, that tainted the older stonework with mortar and made the underlying ruins very hard to understand. Officially, the irregular stonework at the base is dated to the arrival of Greek colonists around 6th century BC, making these works too late to be one of the Cyclopean culture as the ones in Mycenae. But that young age is not a problem for the mainstream, since they also date most of the European Cyclopean walls to the 5th century BC. In this case, it's me who is going against the tide, not following the myths, neither that the Cyclopean walls were built by magical unibrow creatures, as some ancient texts say, nor as the current academic gospel goes, that one day, for no reason, everyone was simply deciding to build Cyclopean walls, just to quit the next day for no reason either. Ignoring the so-called experts, ancient or new, for me the true Cyclopean walls were built by a lost European culture that during the Bronze Age dominated the Mediterranean coast until they were overwhelmed by the Indo-European invaders. This is a theory that has a lot going for it, and that the site of Panticapaeum being Cyclopean and so further north could help to confirm or dismiss, with the following dilemma. Either it was a cheap wall made by Greek colonists with irregular stones and mortar, and thus the Cyclopean builders did not reach up north, or it was a truly Cyclopean wall, built during the Bronze Age, and for that implying the Cyclops were extending further north, and that the Indo-Europeans were coming from somewhere else. That much is, in a nutshell, what we'll try to investigate today. Let's start at the beginning. A long time ago, people were living in caves, at least in Crimea. And according to Wikipedia, those troglodytes were the Byzantines, not such a long time ago after all. Before dwelling into this polemic, it's better to clarify that there are plenty of very ancient inhabited caves in Crimea, even older than the usual stuff, like this. Kikoba, that's a name, was found to have remains of Neanderthal populations from as early as 80,000 BC, an enormously old age, even for Neanderthal standards, that usually hang around these joints at 40,000 BC. Not to be outdated, Buran Kaya, another cave in Crimea, has the earliest remains of modern humans ever found in Europe from 32,000 BC, or so they say. In Crimea we can never be sure. With these extreme precedents, one would expect the monumental cave cities in Crimea to be also quite old. But no. Whilst in nearby Georgia, very similar sites, i.e., cave cities with continuous usage until recently, have been dated to the 2nd millennium BC or older, when it comes to the cave cities in Crimea, they are said to be Byzantine. Yes, after the Romans. Which is bizarre. Usually around Europe, all the old things are said to be pre-Roman, because that's the first time we have written references for them, forcing whatever is older than the Roman text to be dated to the 5th century BC, just because all the other millennia leading into that age aren't accounted for in writing. This academic cop-out of saying everything in Europe was built merely weeks before the Romans arrived is failing in Crimea, although in the wrong direction, with the cave cities being dated after the Romans, as late as medieval times, thousands of years younger than equivalent sites in nearby Georgia. It's crazy, I know. Let's just take a closer look at the caves whilst trying to let this idea sink in. Hey, stop there. Have you noticed the hole in the ground? It is so much like tattoo in Bulgaria, but is said to be 2000 years younger. And now, does this wall looks polygonal? Yeah, it does, right? But I don't think it is. It's just some cut stones piled on later on. Sorry for the interruption. Moving ahead in time after the cavemen, we'd expect to find megalithic builders with the dolmens and all the other big rock stuff, apparently built by giants. These massive structures are to be found everywhere in Eurasia, from Portugal to Korea, and Crimea is no exception. There are quite a few dolmens in the peninsula, but they shouldn't be there, at least to keep the official timeline barely logical. This is about to get complicated, so please allow me first to go around the Black Sea to establish what we have evidence for, and then I'll try to explain. The dolmens in Crimea are said to be from the 3rd millennium BC. That's a decent date for a dolmen, but unfortunately the evidence is not quite there. What has been properly dated via dead bodies inside are the dolmens in the Caucasus, which are close by, so good enough, although their style is not quite the same. The dolmens in the Caucasus Mountains have these hallways and little round holes, similar to those to be found in Bulgaria or Thrace. However, the Thracian ones are said to be 1500 years younger than the ones in the Caucasus, which is BS obviously. The dolmens in Crimea do not have that little round hole for a door, at least for what I could find, but they are also less preserved, so they could have been just damaged. Finally, around this sea, the black one, there's also Romania, that has no dolmens, which is a bummer and basically disproves anything the academics are trying to push us, namely the Yamnaya. Okay, now that we've seen the goodies, I mean the dolmens, let me tell you that the reasons we are told the dolmens in Crimea are the same age as the ones in the Caucasus, but not as the ones in Bulgaria, is because of the Danube Delta in Romania, being the path used by the Yamnaya to reach the south of Europe. And accordingly to the mainstream, the Yamnaya took 2000 years to go from Ukraine into Greece, and along the way started and quit building dolmens about 3 times, and also traveled all around Asia in random order. No kidding, that's the argument. The Yamnaya are said to be the original Indo-Europeans, the population that brought into Europe the languages we speak today, and the basis of our European culture. And that much is true, in the sense that Europe was converted into the Indo-European languages quite recently, most of it around 1000 BC. Whilst before that, before the Indo-Europeans, there were other cultures in Europe, namely those that I like to call Cyclopean, but are also known as Iberian, Pelasgian or Aborigine. The contentious item is to find out where these Indo-Europeans were coming from. In World War II, that nasty little guy with the mustache infamously said the Indo-Europeans were coming from Germany, and had a bunch of research forged for that. Later, after the war, that other nasty and even smaller guy with the mustache said the Indo-Europeans were coming from Ukraine, and had a bunch of research forged. Although the irony somehow escaped academics, they embraced the second idea, rebranded it as the Kurgan hypothesis, and agreed the Indo-Europeans were playing some absurd game of whack-a-mole, with them showing up in the most unexpected places, coming in from Ukraine in 4000 BC and then moving to Mongolia, Turkey, Iberia, Iran and India in random sequence, whilst learning and forgetting to build dolmens all along the way. There is just no other way to explain all the nonsense of that Kurgan hypothesis. All we can do is to notice that most of the research done in the 1950s by the Soviets has since then been disproven. I'm sorry, but this mess gets even worse. Kurgan, as in the word for that Kurgan hypothesis I just mentioned for the origins of the Indo-Europeans in Ukraine, is nothing more than a fancy word for a tomb. Thus, everywhere people died, as they sometimes do, and were buried, there are tombs or kurgans. The problem here is the manipulation of prehistory committed by these nasty little people with mustaches and their awful politics. This time the problem was caused by Marija Gimbutas, that I'm unsure about the mustache, but convinced also had nasty political motivations, for pushing this blatantly absurd idea that the Indo-Europeans were originally from Ukraine, and went on a game of whack-a-mole all over. Proving it, air commas intended, by calling Kurgan to all sorts of unrelated burial sites, with very different styles and across a broad region. The oldest ones from 4000 BC, arguably in the Ukrainian steppes, have no stonework, are basically dug graves. The dolmens in Crimea are 1000 years later and have extensive stonework. They are megalithic. Across Central Asia, every single monumental grave, usually from 500 BC or even younger, are also called kurgans. In Romania, likewise in the Ukrainian steppes for that matter, there was no sort of large stonework until our era. So, kurgans are again simple earth mounds. This much incoherence would be sufficient to expose the radical political views of the bureaucrats pushing forward the Kurgan hypothesis. But there's more, as we'll see. As if we were not turned off enough by the new theories concerning the original population of Crimea, the old ones were no better either. During classical antiquity, the inhabitants of Crimea were associated with the mythical Amazons, the horseback riding military ladies, not the river in Brazil, nor the only visitor I get at home. This myth of the Amazon's girl power is no better historical record than the Kurgan theory we just dismantled, even for the standards of ancient times. Just take this example. According to some reputed sources like Elenaikos or Hippocrates, the Amazons would cut off their breast in order to better use a bow and arrow. Yeah, even with all the recent dysphorias, I don't think we've gotten that far in gender bending. Or maybe we did. Naturally, this whole myth is nothing more than a myth, with some basic reality underlying it, albeit a racist one, to ensure we keep on stuck on polemics. The most likely base for the Amazons were the Scythians or Sarmatians, Asiatic steppes people that would torment the Greeks with their horseback riding, bow and arrows, and lack of body hair. It might have started as a slur, calling them effeminate, but eventually the idea became a meme, and we can't seem to get rid of it in public bathrooms. What is relevant is that Crimea was, during the Iron Age, occupied by Scythian warlords, and that they were dying with treasuries, placed in tombs with a very particular shape. A tolos is a structure built in the shape of a beehive. For that much, it is also called a beehive tomb. Creative, I know. And this style of building was quite popular in Greece, Portugal, and Crimea, opening up a whole new set of controversy, as if we had enough hot topics getting this far. Just for the sake of simplification, let's cut off the tolos in Portugal that are dated to 2500 BC and are built of rustic stonework and quite beaten down. They might not be related to the others. The notorious examples are the treasuries in Greece, found around Mycenae. There are plenty of tolos in Greece, and some of them are magnificent structures of unclear usage, being dated to the Bronze Age for their proximity with Mycenae to the Cyclopean Walls, and not because anything else was ever found inside one. Then we have the tolos of Crimea, which are incredibly similar to the ones in Greece, but are said to be nearly 1,000 years younger. And also, they are not called tolos, but kurgan, because kurgan is the mandatory word. Most famous of them all is the royal kurgan in Kersh, found to have remains of a Scythian ruler from the 4th century BC, during a time when Greek colonists were already around, and claimed to have Hellenized that same city of Panticapaeum, as Kersh was called then. There are around 200 Scythian tombs dated from this era, but unfortunately these are spread all the way into Kazakhstan and not similar in structure to the tolos in Kersh. So again we are trapped in the maze of inconsistent evidence and academic disingenuity. Here's the proposed scenarios. 1. The tolos of Crimea, although used by the Scythians, could have been built in the Bronze Age, as the ones in Greece and later reused by the Scythians. Or vice versa, in 2. The tolos in Greece are young and unrelated to the Cyclopean Walls of Mycenae nearby. Also very strange is the official one in 3, saying the Tolos in Crimea were built 1,000 years later, but inspired by a long-gone fashion from Greece. God knows how. What is true, I don't know. As we are getting used to by now, nothing makes sense in Crimea, but also in highly politicized topics as this one, nothing is so bad that it cannot get worse. Oh, but wait, there's even more craziness coming your way. Almost aliens. As if we hadn't gone through enough bizarre and incomprehensible finds. Recently, a boy's skeleton with a suspiciously long head was excavated in Crimea and dated to the 2nd century BC. Worse, it is not an isolated case. Elongated skulls are to be found all over the world, in as many places as there is a known history to mystify. Luckily, not all those sites with long skulls are Cyclopean, because I could not bear the idea of a cyclops with a large and pointy head. It's too much deformity, just too ugly. Still, these long heads exist and have been known for a long time. The ancient Greeks called the people filling pointy heads to the top the macrocephaly and mentioned they were a breed of people living in Crimea. Where else? As if Amazons, Guacamole Indo-Europeans and the time-traveling Tolos were not enough, the elongated skulls are also in there. Trying to make sense of the skull deformation, there are two currents of opinion addressing this bone problem. One is that wrapping the heads of newborn babies is a stupid idea that gets to be popular again and again and persisted up until the 20th century in unsuspected places such as the French town of Toulouse. Whilst the other is that there is more to it, with some ancient fetuses having been found to have abnormally long skulls, and also the argument that if people come back again and again to one odd idea, they would have had some sort of inspiration. Whatever the case, we had enough crazy for today, so I won't be able to wrap this over our heads for now. Confused yet? I am. I tried very hard to keep some common sense about the events and evidence to be found in Crimea, but the amount of weirdness, inconsistencies, and ludicrous theories combined with nasty politics is just too vast. Starting with the rock caves that are dated by what is found inside, as if the later inhabitants were some negligent housewives that lived around ancient dead bodies without ever cleaning the place. Then we have the Guacamole Indo-Europeans that show up by surprise wherever they are least expected, as if their two chief weapons were surprise and fear, and ruthless efficiency. Also the kurgan that sometimes are plain earth mounds, others are elaborate dolmens, and can even become funerary pyres if the needed circumstances arise. Or the tolos are also called kurgan, because why not, said to have been taken to Crimea by the Greeks, 1,000 years after they were abandoned in Greece. All this, plus the breast-cutting Amazon ladies and the elongated skulls, it's too much creepiness for such a small place. Okay, let's take a breather here. With all that we've seen, how can we make sense of that wall in Panticapaeum? I bet you forgot about it. I don't blame you. After all the freak shows we've gone through. But remember, the original intention of this video was to try and understand if the wall in Panticapaeum was Cyclopean or not. Like this. Could it be a wall built in the Bronze Age by a Cyclopean culture, using the Cyclopean technique and then reassembled by the Romans? Or is it an original work from the 5th or 6th century made at the same time as the Tolos, the elongated skulls, and the Amazons and all the other outlandish circus stuff? Academics say it's the latter, although they look to be wrong about everything else they say about Crimea. They could very well be right on this one. Just let me know in the comments what you think, whilst we go look again at the wall. Here's the thing, Crimea is an odd place. On one hand, it is a coastal area with direct access to the Mediterranean Sea, and for that an integral part of the settled South European cultures, Cyclopean or not. On the other hand, it is at the core of the Great Asian Steppes, and for that is an easy prey for the nomadic cultures that roam from China to Poland. These two very different worlds meet in Crimea, making it a microcosmos of everything foreign. That looked to the Greeks, likewise to the Scythians, and even to us as a frontier to another world. Maybe this is the reason why people cannot stop fighting about that place. Since forever, not just this last war. The amount of wars that have been fought over there is truly unbearable. And with war there is deception and academic sellout. Unfortunately, academics are easy to buy, since they depend exclusively on government funding, making them play whatever political tune is in charge. Then, with Crimea being such a contested place, dragged to all sorts of imperial manias, the tune academics play over there is whatever makes war justifiable, making it impossible to discern the facts, like the dolmens or the tolos, from fiction, like the Kurgan hypothesis or the Amazons without boobies. So, that's enough for war and lies. Next, we'll be looking for the Cyclopean builders in somewhere remote and idyllic, away from all this tension, the land of Napoleon. That's it for today. Hope you liked it. See you in the comments.